Hello, everyone, and welcome. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Jessica Korik. I work in the AT Still Research Institute, and today Laura Lipke from the library is going to be presenting along with Adrian Brody. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. My name is Laura Lipke. I am the medical librarian on the Missouri campus, specifically liaison to KCOM and CGHS nursing departments. I've put my email on each slide of the presentation to highlight that no matter where you are in the research process, to please contact the library for any help. We're here for any part of your research. So first, I'd like to start out by going over types of literature reviews. Now, a literature review is an umbrella term. It covers various types of reviews that are done to synthesize research or literature. But today, specifically, we're going to discuss narrative review, a scoping review, and a systematic review, just to give you an idea. So a narrative review is essentially done to establish a need for a research project. It's mostly about background. What you're doing for a narrative review is looking at the conversation within the literature, within the profession about a specific topic. You may do this to identify a gap or a need in the research. You may have inclusion-exclusion criteria, but not necessarily. No protocol is required. The findings are synthesized, but they're not critical. But each piece of literature that's included within the review is not critically analyzed. So the authors for a narrative review will choose which articles they include and exclude. So they're mostly looking to support what they want to do. So anyone in the audience, why do you think that this type of review might have a higher risk of bias? We can kind of think about that question as we go through the scoping and then get to the systematic review. It might become more clear. So a scoping review is more comprehensive than a narrative review. It clearly defines the inclusion and exclusion criteria. Its purpose is to identify existing literature on a specific topic. And the literature is based on the inclusion-exclusion criteria. And this might be a precursor to a systematic review. More often, authors are using the PRISMA protocol for scoping reviews. The searching is done in a systematic approach and it's documented, but not as comprehensively as a systematic review. And then we have a systematic review, and this was the big one. And this is the term that a lot of people use even when they're doing a narrative review. So it's really important to know the difference between these types of reviews, because the systematic review does require the use of a protocol. It critically appraises each piece of research that's included within the review. It's comprehensive, systematic, and especially transparent. So each step of the search process has to be documented so that it can be reproduced, including the search terms, the search strategies, which databases are used, which limits are used. Everything is required. It also requires a minimum of 2 reviewers. A third is preferable to break a tie, whether a piece of research is included in the review or not. I've included a link from Cochrane, and this is their training on systematic reviews, and it's free. I've taken it, it's very good. I got a little lost on the statistics because I'm not a math person, but the essential basics of it are there. And of course, we have people within the Department of Research Support to help you with the statistical part. But take a look at that Cochrane training. I think it'll make a big difference. So now that we've gone through those different types of systematic reviews, can you see now how a narrative review may have a higher risk of bias? Because the author is picking and choosing the cherries that really fit with their research project. Whereas in a systematic review, you don't get to pick and choose which fit best with your research. This is done in a very systematic manner, and it has to follow a strict protocol. Does anyone have any questions about different types of reviews? Okay, and of course, I'm going to share all of the slides and the links on the slides with Dr. Roy, so you can go back through this. So no matter what type of review do you decide to conduct, the library is happy to help, even from developing your research question to determining which type of review, doing education with you and your team on the different types of reviews, the elements that are required for the type of review you might choose to do, the resources that are available through the library and throughout the university, putting together your search strategy, determining which databases are most applicable to your research, how to develop search strings, search hedges, selecting resources to search, and organizing your search results. But first, we need to construct an answerable research question. And generally that's done with the PICO model. So most of the time when people come to Adrian or I with a research question, it's very complex. It has a lot of elements. What the PICO model does is it helps you to break down to the very basics. What are the keywords or the key elements of that research question that we really need to focus on? When you're searching through Google, say on a Saturday night to find a Chinese restaurant near the movie theater that you're going to, you use more of a conversational tone. But when you're searching databases, the algorithms use primary keywords. So it's really important that we focus your research question down to those primary elements and use this PICO format to help you do that. Now, of course, there are other models as well, such as PEO, Finer, and Spider, but I'm going to focus on PICO today because it's the most common and the most basic. And this model can be used for clinical and or research questions, for quantitative or for qualitative research. So this is the table that we generally use for PICO. And P stands for patient, population, or problem. I is intervention, C is control, and outcome is measure. When I'm working with someone in the beginning of their research, I tell them to primarily focus, on the patient, problem, the P, and the I. Let's find out what the literature or what the conversation is in the literature about the P and the I first. And then maybe we could focus it more on the O, unless the O is the most important part of your research. But generally, when you're first starting out with an idea, you want to learn about the background information and really focus on the P and the I. So if that's the only part that you have, you're already off to a great start. So let's take a look at an example research question. Among postpartum mothers, do group therapy sessions diminish symptoms of depression? So take a look at this question and the PICO model. What's the patient, population, or problem? And I'm all about having an interaction in my presentation. So anybody wants to speak up, go right ahead. And I can't see chat, so.
Postpartum mothers.
Great, great. Anybody for intervention?
Group therapy sessions.
Great. And how about outcome?
Long-term well-being or lack of, what is that thing, the depression women get?
Excellent. Yeah. Lack of depression or diminished depression. Absolutely. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Generally, control is NA, unless you're comparing it to another type of intervention maybe. So you want to compare group therapy to medicinal aids. Maybe you want to see which is better because you want to promote group therapy over medications. So now we've broken down our complex research question and we've focused on the key terms, but we need to know how to combine those key terms in a database. And we do that with Boolean operators. And that's these listed here. And is a Boolean operator that combines the terms. So we want to combine our P and our I. So postpartum mothers and group therapy and diminished depression. Or is used between synonyms. So maybe perinatal or group therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy. Truncation is used at the end of a root word. For example, I would use that at the end of depress. And let me show you how that looks. So by putting the truncation at the end of depress, that tells the database that I will accept any article that says depression or depressive or depressed. So we're telling the database, please find me articles that discuss the key term postpartum and group therapy. Now I've put quotes around group therapy because I want to search that as a phrase. If I didn't put the quotes around it, it might search each term separately. And depress. So any version of the word depressed, depression, depressive. So I am going to, let's go into the database and take a look at that, how that looks. When you are going to search the library, please always enter the library through the portal. By doing this, what that does is it links your affiliation to the university to all of our resources. All of our resources are behind a paywall. So if you start by linking your affiliation to our resources, then when you do find that great article, you don't have to go through all the signing in and everything else. Just get it over with in the beginning and you'll be all set. Let's go into advanced search. And one thing I really like about the PICO model is that it's set up just like the advanced search on a database. So here's our P box. Any questions so far? Please stop me if you have any questions. So again, we're telling the database, please find me articles that say postpartum and group therapy as a phrase and any version of the word depression. I ask you to please do not use full text limiter. You have unlimited access to interlibrary loan. So you don't have to worry about whether you don't want to miss out on a great article just because it's not offered in full text right away. We probably do want peer reviewed. We want to find articles that are within the past 5 years. Oops. And using these limiters brings us down to 47 articles, which is manageable. So you can go through and you can see how our key terms are highlighted or bolded. As you're scanning through the results of your research, take a look at the other terms that are highlighted or are in these articles that are relevant to what you're doing. So here's perinatal, psychotherapy might be another term. And here is, if we liked this article, We could request it through interlibrary loan. You just fill in your personal information and hit submit, and it'll be sent to your email within a couple days. Here's the abstract for the article. If you want to email the article to yourself, you can do that here. Here's the citation. Please make sure that you take a look at the formatting of the citation because these are computer generated. You can export it to your citation manager, and I'll go over using a citation manager a little later in the presentation. If you want to save the link for the article, please use the permalink. This link up here in your browser changes constantly. This is the permanent address for this particular article. You could also look at the subject terms or the keywords identified. So here they have postnatal depression and they have postnatal hyphenated. Another article might not have postnatal hyphenated. My point is when you're looking for synonyms to use to kind of adapt and adjust your search, think that different people refer to different terms with different spellings. I mean, just like some people throughout the country refer to sneakers as kicks or tennies, it's the same in the medical field. We use different terms to refer to the same syndrome or group of people or condition. So let's see what it looks like. We had 47 when we went through with just our other terms. Now let's use the or Boolean. Remember, or is used in between synonyms, and see what search results we get. So that bumped it up significantly to 496 by adding those additional terms. So there is more information out there. We just have to add the different terms. This might be too much to go through, 500 articles, depending on what type of review you're doing, right? If you're doing a narrative review, this might be a little much. If you're doing a systematic review, you may need to capture all of this information. If it is too much, what you can do is take that out, and then search like that. But keep track of the different search algorithms that you use. So that brought us down to 318. Different combinations, whatever databases you're looking at, etc. Any questions on doing an advanced search through still one search? Okay. So still one search is only 28 databases. It does not include UpToDate or PubMed. But it's a great place to start to get some background information to just to start your searches. So here's an example of my synonyms list. So then we've done our background search and still one search, but we want to get more specific and look at PubMed. And PubMed uses a controlled vocabulary called MESH. And this is hierarchically organized vocabulary. So it starts at the base of the tree. They call it a mesh tree. At the trunk of the tree is very general. And then as it gets out on the branches, it becomes more specific. But essentially what this means, is that I like to compare it to Twitter hashtags. If you want your tweet to be associated with an organization or with an event, you use a hashtag. So what PubMed has done is come up with this controlled vocabulary. And when an author submits an article, a group of experts go through the article and identify which terms in that article match the controlled vocabulary, and they link that with the mesh terms. Any questions about that? And we'll go through and take a look at that. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like and how to use it. So again, when you are accessing PubMed, please access it through the library. PubMed is a database of citations. It is not a database of full text articles. By accessing PubMed through the library homepage, it gives you access to the full text, and I'll show you what that looks like. But let's go into MeSH first. So you can see that these are all the databases of NCBI. We want the MeSH database. So we're going to take our population, which is postpartum, and first we want to make sure that PubMed is defining our terms exactly the same way we are. If it is not, we want to look for another term that's more appropriate. But here's the branching that I was talking about. So here are all MeSH categories. And anatomy, I think, is a great example of how MeSH works. So if we think of the body, human anatomy, it starts out with animal structures, bacteria, body regions. So even if you just think of the skeleton, there's so many different parts of the body and cells. So you could see how it becomes, if we go into the GI tract, how it becomes more specific as you go further down the tree. Any questions about the MeSH organization? Okay. So let's add that to our search builder. So again, we want to make sure that the MeSH term matches our definition. We're going to add that to our search builder. And you could even see here that depression can be considered a behavioral mechanism or an emotional. We'll add that to our search builder, and then we're going to search PubMed. We could adjust the timeline here. And take a look at this article. Now, another thing that I really like about PubMed are these features over here to the right. This gives us links to similar articles. Here we can look at the MeSH terms associated, so we can again identify other terms that have to do with our research. Maybe some things we didn't even think about. Here's depressive disorder, so that might be another term that we want to add to that. And sometimes, if it's appropriate for an article, there will be a section called Cited By, which will give you more recent articles. Any questions on PubMed? And here's the full text link here. Here's the citing. Okay. So remember the PubMed tools, the MeSH terms, and I'm talking about these over here. You want to look at the MeSH terms. You want to look at the similar articles. Cited by and cite, make sure you check the format, and then you could save it, email it, or send it to your citation manager. Speaking of citation managers, why would you want to use one? I've heard some feedback from faculty that they don't like to recommend citation managers because sometimes citation managers don't use the correct citation format. So I always emphasize to the students, it's up to you to check the format of the citation, but there are many more reasons to use a citation manager, primarily to organize your research. I'm going to give you a brief look at mine. So if you look over here, I have my library, and then I have a couple other libraries. Sponsored Programs was asking me, when they do research for a grant, they have different people working on different parts of it. So what we did was we went in and we developed their own library, and then each person that's doing their part of the research has their own file, but it's all under the same library. And then you could see up here that I have my different projects. So if we go back to PubMed, and you could see up here is my Zotero, and I could add that and it goes right into my library. I could also choose whatever file that I want to add it to. And then if we go back here, if I want to save all of these 318 articles, a folder will appear up here, and I would save that to my library or whatever folder is appropriate for that research project. And I will also go through and show you how to use Zotero within a document. But so don't think of it just as something that helps you with citations. It's an organization tool. It helps you keep all of your research organized. And some journals do require you to have all your research sources in a citation manager prior to publication. So you keep that in mind as well. These are three that I wanted to highlight that are free: EndNote, Mendeley, and Zotero. I personally like Zotero because I use Google Docs a lot, especially for collaborative research projects with other librarians outside the university. And Zotero works well with Google Docs. PaperPile does too, but PaperPile is not free. It's like $2.99 a month, something like that. I think you can get a free EndNote version, the paid version through the university. So whichever works best for you, maybe whatever your colleagues prefer to use for their research projects. Okay, so to set up your Zotero, you want to go to zotero.org. Make sure you download both of these. You want to download for Windows and for Chrome. That way you will get the link to use in Google Docs. And I know, me personally, it's easier for me to do something while someone is telling me about it. But generally, after you download Zotero, it requires you to restart your computer. So if you could wait until afterwards to do it. I put all the directions here on this slide. And again, I'll send all the slides to Dr. Roy to forward them to you. Okay, so I said that I would go into a Google Doc and show you how it works. So if we were talking about postpartum, so when I first hit it, it's going to let me choose what style I want. As a librarian, I use APA, but there's AMA also in Chicago. So I'm going to choose that. I'm going to choose the classic view and then go into my library and choose whichever article I want to cite for that. I know this isn't the right one, but just to give you an example. Okay. So after we do that, when we've completed all of our in-text citations, then you can add your bibliography. And ta-da, it is a lifesaver. I cannot imagine not having this anymore now that I've learned how to use it. It's incredible. And please, if you have any questions about using it or setting it up, or at any point, if you have something a little more complex, like I showed you with sponsored programs, never hesitate to contact me. So I'm more versed in Zotero, and Adrian uses EndNote. So whichever you choose, we could certainly help you through that. Does anyone have any questions about citation managers? Okay. I added a few little extra nuggets here. This is a resource that we use to help students and researchers learn how to identify predatory journals. I'm sure you've heard the term before, and what they're doing is they're taking advantage of researchers that are either required to publish for tenure, or just as a profession, boost their way through the profession. So please be very careful when you are looking at a journal to publish. If it looks too easy, or if they're asking for excessive amounts of money, contact the librarians or maybe your colleagues to ask if they've heard about this. One thing I always recommend to students is go into PubMed. So if you're interested in a particular journal, say Advances in Orthopedics is the journal you're looking to publish in, put it in brackets, the word journal, and it will search for that specific journal. In our profession, if the journal itself is not in PubMed, yeah, I might want to question whether to publish in that or not. Unless you're looking in education or something like that that is not necessarily found in PubMed, that would be different. But you could do the same thing in still one search. You could search the same way for a journal. Okay, and the last nugget I have for you today is your ORCID ID. ORCID allows you to link you to your professional activities, especially if you have a more common name. You don't want your publications to get mixed up with someone else who might have a similar name. It ties you to your publications. It keeps track of your publications through the link. So all you have to do is put your ORCID ID in there. Someone can click on that link and pull up all your publications. And plus, it's hard to keep track of everything that you're doing for your CV or your BioSketch. ORCID helps you keep track of all that stuff. It's also required by numerous organizations and publishers, and it helps simplify the article submission and grant application process. And we have lots of information about ORCID on the LibGuide there. So the most important thing I want you to remember today is my email or any of the librarians' emails. We are more than happy to help at any point of your research. So that went really fast. Does anybody have any questions? You're all oh, excuse me. Go ahead, Christine.
Thanks, Laura. Could you give us more of an example of using Zotero to, when you're working on your manuscript, does it actually take it and put the link in your submission, or how does that work? That citation manager specifically.
Okay, can you repeat your question?
So when I'm writing my article and I
Okay.
want to actually take the link from my citation manager and put it in my references or index it in that article? Does it
Okay.
do that for you?
Yes, yes. So let's go through and do an example of that. Let's see. Can you see? You can't see how I'm typing. I got to share my screen again. Hold on one sec. Okay, can you see my Google Doc right now?
Yes.
Okay. So once I put in a paraphrase statement, and you could see Zotero up here. So I click on Zotero. I'm going to add my in-text citation. Choose the classic view, and then I'll go through and find the article that is appropriate to that paraphrase doc. So you could see that it added so that it's in my, and this is my my reference list or my bibliography right here. Let's use a different one. Is this answering your question? So then when I go here, I'm going to edit my bibliography. And you could see that the two that I put in there in my in-text citation, oops, are down here in my bibliography. And Zotero did that for me.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful because sometimes I work in Google Docs in a group.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering how that would work. This citation manager, I haven't used one in this way with
Okay.
Google Docs. So if I was working with the group, would we all have the same, could we share the same references?
Yes. And yes, what I would recommend you do is like I did down here for sponsored programs. I made their own library so you could use your account here. Let's do it. So if I had a new group, if I was doing a group research project, I would do a new group and let's say, and then you could determine if it's going to be public open membership, private, choose public closed membership, and you're going to create a group. And then you could determine, you could put people in there. You could determine how you want the privacy settings, and you could add people to the group. So then I would do here. Or you can determine groups. I'm sorry, there's another way to do that, and it's not, I must not have the setting on there, right? Okay. Closed. There we go. So then if I go to people, it should, there is a way, and I'm sorry, I can't figure it out right now. There is a way to add people to the groups. Manage members, here we go. And here you can send more invitations. So here I can put in, And I could invite members to be part of that group for me. Yeah, and it didn't work that time, and I'm sorry. If you want to set up a private meeting, we can certainly go through that and learn how to do that.
Oh, okay, that was helpful. I'm just glad
Okay.
I can do that, because when I worked in Google Docs, we haven't used a citation manager. We've just kind of created a reference list, and it's nice to know that I can do that now.
Yeah, and then everybody can, if everyone is doing a specific part of the project, they could have their own folder underneath that main library. So like I did with sponsored programs, so project 1 and then project 2, so that everyone has their own specific citations if they're working on a different part of the project. But they would all show up in the main library, so everyone would have access to that. But then if they're, say, if only project 1 was working on biomechanical and project 2 was working on neurological, then they could keep those references separate, but everyone would have access to it through the main library. Does anyone else have any questions about Zotero at all? Or anything that I've gone over? Oh, okay. Adrian's saying that it didn't work because I didn't have a comma between the emails. Okay, thank you. Well, I hope to hear from you all soon to help you get started with your research. Again, even from developing your research question to identifying the key terms to arranging search strategies. Now, what we did today was very simplistic. I understand that as you get deeper into the research, that search strings and search hedges can get very complex. I don't want to give you the impression that Adrian and I aren't capable of doing that, because we certainly are. But I wanted to just start at the beginning today and keep it there. So even for more complex assistance, we're happy to help you with that too. Okay, I will give you an extra 10 minutes to your day. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And like I said, I will share the slides and the links with Dr. Roy so that you'll have them for future access.